1, 2, 1, 2.
That works. Can someone confirm we have sound online? Since we are unsure. Thumbs up.
Yep.
Yes, perfect. Okay, welcome. We threw the hybrid version together now due to the weather. There was supposed to be online only, but we managed to get it done. It's great to see that we have at least a couple of you online and a good amount of people who managed to show up physically. Personally, I used a couple of hours and I live inside the city. Jan Vidar, you had some struggles as well.
I came now and started from home around 2, so 3 hours.
That's dedication. Okay, so this is a collaboration with Sparebank and Utvikling and Azure User Group Norway. So we are 3 people organizing Azure User Group Norway here. We have Anders, who's currently unavailable to come. We have Jan Vidar and myself. And we do this from time to time with proper dedication, of course, traveling 3 hours. But we find this fun, and for the first time in maybe almost a year, we have an external physical event, which is good, and it's not Microsoft Office, which is also really good. So we're really looking forward to today. And with that, Matt, who's our host here, together with Sparebank 1 and the offices. That's so a round of applause for that. This is your creation.
Yeah, so we are continuing the year wheel of activities. This is our first in-person meetup for the year. We plan to have something in the spring and autumn and something before Christmas as well. We will do virtual lunches every month. In fact, we have one pencil in for next Thursday at 11 a.m. That's Teams only. So grab something to eat and listen to an interesting topic. I think it was something around AI next week with a Dutch speaker. So sign up for that. Yeah, we will also talk a little about global Azure in a little while. So we are looking for content. We are very happy today to have speakers from Sparebank 1 with Roger and Erhan. And also Zach has spoken before us and always deliver great content. So if you are interested in speaking, you can put a proposal in at our session notes link there. We are more than happy to accommodate Norwegian experiences on Azure, anything Azure.
Global Azure 2024. We hosted 3 events last year through Azure User Group Norway. We have planned for 3 this year as well, but we are always looking forward for any other locations. So you can get some more information on these links, how Global Azure works. Short, it's a global Azure event, physically or online. All, is it 3 days? You can, like, 3 days. Choose from April 18th to 20th if you want to do a 3-day event, or if you want to do 1 day or 1 evening between those dates, then you're welcome. And every event across the globe is happening on the same time. So it's a really cool thing to attend or host if you want to do that.
At this point, one back again. At this point, we I think we are at least working at 3 locations. Oslo, I think Devotem will sponsor an event again, and Kristiansand, maybe with or without Noroff. I don't think, probably, or some, but they will certainly host an event in Kristiansand. And my company AVD will help sponsor an event in Bergen. So if you're coming from a company and you're in another city, please reach out if you want to arrange something. It could be a breakfast, it could be a lunch, it could be an afternoon session, it could be some hacking on a Saturday, it could be anything. So creativity. Yeah.
Okay, practical info. Do we need it? You need to be accomplished by a host if you want to leave. So is that true, Matt? Or can we just leave when you want to? Yeah. Yeah. That's all you need to know, I guess. So Jan Vidar, I got access to Copilot yesterday. We are all lucky. So if you bought license, you can do Copilot things. And since you sent me this slide deck, I had to try it out. So I did this thing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to revolutionize my or Jan Vidar's slide deck. So I tried, okay, let's recreate the slide of the presentation of tonight's speakers. Make it a bit more stylish. Not the best prompt you can do, but I didn't have much time. So it created a new slide. And then for some reason, it removed all the headshots of everyone. And I thought maybe it's a good thing to show the face of the speakers for each and every session. So you might know what happened. So I said, please include this, the photo of the speakers. Yes, I completed some of your requests, but I need more practice. This is what happened. Yeah. So it actually literally put on a speaker on top of the schedule. I'm not sure that's how it's supposed to be done, but at least it said it's learning by doing. But I thought it was fun to just, it was my first experience, or my second experience. So late last night I got Copilot, and then I found documents from someone inside my company that I shouldn't read. And then I tried it again today, and I ended up creating a speaker on top of everyone's face. So I'm not sure this is, I'm not too happy just yet. Okay, so we're a little bit behind schedule, but we're starting out with Roger and Erhan. You can probably introduce your session yourself, but this is about Azure Landing Zones Vending Machine, so self-service about landing zones. Then we have Zach, who has cost optimization session for us today. And then we'll do a Q&A and a mingle. That's at least how the schedule is set up. So I think we switch computers and then get started.
Okay, la oss sette i gang. Wrong language. Welcome to my head. Okay, Roger and Erhan are going to take you through this presentation about Landing Zone Vending Machine and the concept we created there. But before they get stuck into that, I just wanted to start with a little bit of background about Sparebank 1. Maybe everyone has seen the logos and know the brand, but maybe not what lies back and some of the infrastructure that we have to deal with. So very quickly, I'll get through the marketing bit. Sparebank 1 is basically just marketing. There is no Sparebank 1. There are a series of banks and companies that make up quite a large alliance. These banks own 60-odd companies, of which we in Sparebank 1 Utvikling are one of those companies. And we provide shared services to the alliance. And that can be marketing, purchasing, so on, but mainly IT, and not least the mobile bank and the net bank that maybe Sparebank 1 is most known for. There's also lots of other brand names in the alliance. So it's a huge financial organization, or alliance is the right word. It's an alliance. So yeah, this is also something that's quite important to understand, is that we obviously have a very important role in the cloud platform that we have, but Sparebank 1 Utvikling has chosen AWS for the internal developer platform. So some of you may come from a world where you run that on Azure, and that's maybe why we have a slightly different take on things, and maybe why we don't mention some things. But what we do is we deliver to all the banks across the alliance in a multi-tenant environment. So we have to be able to deliver a landing zone anywhere across the alliance with all the needs and the desires of certain of that particular unit in the alliance. So just so that's said, I will now pass you over to Roger and take you through the fun stuff.
Okay, does this work now? It sounds like it does. Do like this. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is a rerun of what we did at the Nordic Infrastructure Conference. So that's why you'll see some references to Nick somewhere throughout our demos. But we start off with looking at what is a landing zone. And again, this is the Azure user group. So we may be kind of preaching to the converted here already on what landing zones are and so on, but we'll share our view on it. We'll have a quick look at why it's worth standardizing. And again, we'll dig into, as Matt mentioned, why this is a problem for us and that we needed to solve. We'll do a demo where we try to use our landing zone order form. We'll take a look at what goes on behind the scenes after you hit send in. We'll then look at the demo, we'll look at the code that is running in the background. Hopefully, if everything goes to plan, we'll look at the newly created landing zone. And at the end, we'll take a look at what we're going to do next for our vending machine. So if we start off with what is actually a landing zone, and a landing zone starts off just a simple Azure subscription. And you take this subscription and you ready it to be able to deploy workloads onto them. In our case, we don't actually deploy the workloads. That's whoever gets to use the landing zone, but we prepare the landing zone. And we do this by using some design areas. So we're basing this off of the Cloud Adoption Framework. All the details about the design areas are listed there. We summarize them into the ones listed here. So identity management, governance. In our case, we're using policy for that. Security, management, and networking. So all of these design areas are something that we have opinions on and that we prepare inside the landing zone before a user gets to use it. So the need for standardization. In our case, and I'm sure this is the same for most other companies, you usually don't just have one subscription or one landing zone. You have multiple of them. It could be like dev test, prod. It can be one per application or whatever works for you. And there also the Cloud Adoption Framework has a bunch of different recommendations depending on what kind of model you want to follow. These landing zones can then be used by or managed by a team, and you can have multiple teams. So this gives you a setting where you have multiple teams that have multiple landing zones. And all of these landing zones, if you're going to do them correctly, according to the design areas, they have settings for security management, networking, blah, 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 blah. In our case, I guess this is also or at least it's been the case everywhere else I've been. There are various types of users. You have the users that are experienced and that run infrastructure as code. They have no issues with it. You have the in-betweeners that know a little bit of Azure but still use the portal. And then you have the complete new beginners that don't know what or where the Azure portal is. All this is fine, but it means that you have you need to create a setting where you have a consistent delivery of what a landing zone is, or the experience will be the same for everyone. And you need to be able to do this at scale. As Matt mentioned, we have multiple banks. Unfortunately for us, that means we have multiple tenants. So we now have multiple tenants with multiple teams, multiple landing zones, and it's all very, very, very distributed. And that's kind of an issue. So the vending machine comes into play here. The base illustration here is again, from the Cloud Adoption Framework. We're basing most of the stuff we do off that. Because we have multiple tenants, also do platform vending. So we spin up an Azure platform in multiple tenants. We call that Eunomia. Not super important for this talk, but you'll see also some references to Eunomia. So that's just the name of our platform. The important part today is the subscription vending. And again, Cloud Adoption Framework. This is the map or the roadmap that is laid out for how you should orchestrate the creation of a landing zone. We've chosen to kind of split this into two parts. So we have the first part, which is kind of the information gathering and the authorization part. We're using a Power App for this, and the way it works is that a user that wants to use the Power App to order a landing zone needs to be put into a couple Entra ID groups. And what this does is that, first off, means that if you're not in any of the groups, you won't be able to load the Power App at all. So once you've been granted permission to use the Power App, the other group will make sure that you are put into, or that when you use the Power App, you will be filtered on where you're allowed to place your subscription billing-wise. Erhan will talk more about this in a little bit. So the Power App then collects a whole bunch of information, and then that is passed into the second part, which is the deployment or the build part of a landing zone. And we're using Azure DevOps for this, and Azure DevOps pipelines or YAML pipelines. Yeah, we've split this into two different pipelines, and we'll get into the details of this in a little bit. And with that, Erhan, let's go make a landing zone.
Let's go for it. All right, thank you, Roger. So before we go into our ordering process here, let's just quickly take a look at some of our steps and processes and the sites that we're working with. So whenever we're receiving a new request, it's creating a new SharePoint list record for us. And one of the reasons for that is because we need to keep a track on all the orders that are going to be submitted. As we can see here, this is completely empty now. I'm also showing you guys this just to show that we're not trying to cheat our way around provisioning a landing zone. So if you go to the portal, we can see that I don't have any subscriptions attached to this user, and that's our base start. So if a developer from a bank or a company in Sparebank in Norway wants to order a new landing zone, what they have to do is to go to our documentation site where we have documented everything in our platform, how the platform works, how to deploy your workloads to the platform, and that's actually where you have to order a landing zone as well. So by hitting the Order LG button, it will take us to the Power App that we have. It takes a couple of seconds, and there's a reason for it, which we'll come back to later. But in this demo, let's focus on that I'm pretending that I'm a developer for a certain company that wants to order a landing zone. As we can see, there are 4 sections we have to walk through. This is looking like a form schema that we have, but the information that we provide here will go directly to our pipelines. So the first one is regarding the organization, and we have to fill out which bank or company we're coming from, and in that way, that will be based on the user that I'm logged in as. So let's choose SB1UDH for the demo purpose. And now we have to fill out who's going to be the owner for the landing zone. And the person that that's going to be added here is basically going to be responsible for the landing zone. It will receive a couple of emails that we use based on the budget that we're setting up. So basically, it's just someone that needs to be responsible for costs and the landing zones. So let's get the user that we logged in as. And the same goes for the access control administrator. Here we need to have someone that could be responsible for the access control of the landing zone. We're creating 3 different Enter ID groups. Those groups will be used within the PIM assignment. So if you were to do some changes or any modifications for the landing zone, you have to elevate your access. And to be able to get access to the landing zone, first of all, you need to be added to one of those groups. So the person that gets added here will be the one that is responsible to invite other developers, other team members, other project managers that needs to get involved in this landing zone. So let's add this user here as well. And now we have to fill out some information on the technical part. This is just for us to set up mostly the connectivity part and what kind of landing zone we want. So the first thing is that we have to choose what kind of Microsoft SLA we want to provision here. And we can either choose a production or non-production. It's basically if you want to have a dev test subscription or a production subscription for your landing zone. For a sandbox environment, you will go for a non-production and then you will get reduced prices, reduced SLA. The next section here is on the virtual network size we want. And all of our landing zones that we're creating, we are also setting up a network for them. That will be for the public and for the private landing zones. We don't do this for the sandbox environment, which is completely isolated and not connected to our network. So as in with the t-shirt sizing, we can choose between small, medium, large virtual networks and allocate those IP addresses for that landing zone. And this demo, let's go for a medium, just to show you, then we should expect to get 64 IP addresses. And moving on, we have to decide what kind of landing zone we want. Either if this is going to be a dev test project, or if you want any production landing zone, you can choose between sandbox, public, or private. And for our case, let's go for private. And lastly, we need to choose the workload name. So we have a naming convention that we follow, and the workload name will actually be the postfix of the landing zone name, which I'm going to show you later on. And we do have some input validation there, so you can't just write whatever you want and expect this to be accepted or use any special characters. It's only alphabetic characters we have to use. And the workload name, Roger, you like scuba diving, don't you?
I do.
Do you have any idea what we can choose? Scuba diving?
Let's go scuba diving.
I think football is better. Let's go with that. And we add the name and go for the next section here, which is the financial. So as I mentioned, we're creating a budget for each and every landing zone that we are provisioning. And the budget we are setting up is that the person that is ordering has to decide or has to come up with the expected monthly usage. So you have to fill out this in Norwegian kroners, and we're setting up the alerts based on the thresholds on 70%, 95, and 100. This is only for alerting purposes. So there are no hard caps. You can still provision landing zones, but this will only help. This is just to help the owners to be more aware of costs. And if you try to create something that you weren't supposed to, you'll get notified right away. And on the last one here, we have to choose the invoice section. So we do have Microsoft customer agreement in Sparebank 1, which means that all the banks have their own billing profiles. And for each billing profile, you can have an invoice section. And that invoice section could be for the sales team, could be for the product team, or a shared cost for the bank. And for the demo, let's go for the product team. And the last part here is actually for the compliance. And we're not doing anything specific here with this information. This is just for us to have some sort of a gatekeeper role. So if I were to create this landing zone and deploy some customer data to the landing zone, and data sensitivity label will be highly restricted, and I haven't done any risk analysis, this is usually a red flag, and we don't want to provision this. And what will happen if we try is that the security department will come to us and ask why we did it, and it will be an issue for us. So what will happen here is that the validation error will pop up and ask for a risk analysis to be done before we could provision this. So let's switch this up and hit review. What will happen in background here is there is another flow that is running, which will gather all this information. On the left side is what we filled out, and on the right side is the landing zone name. As I said, the naming convention is that we have the company name as the prefix, and then the landing zone type, and lastly, the postfix will be the workload name. When we hit submit here, they will start a new flow, which will, first of all, create a new SharePoint list record. And if we take a look at that first to see if we got a new record here, hopefully. There we go. And here is all the information that we provided. And in the background, we'll also send an email. It takes a couple of minutes, so I'll show you guys the email later on. But let's go back to the presentation and see what is going on in the background. So our pipeline is basically dependent on this information that we have here. And it's basically the only reason why we chose to create the Power App, because we can gather all this information based on the user that we have. And the Power App will create this as a JSON file, use the landing zone name as a reference, and commit this to our repository. And all the banks will have their own DevOps repository, so we know that this landing zone will be created for that specific bank. And as Roger mentioned, to be able to access the Power App, you have to be added to a couple of Enter ID groups. This is for access purposes. And whenever you open the app, you saw it took a couple of seconds before it loaded up. And what is happening is that there's a flow that will be running to gather that user profile to see which billing profile you have access to, and show all the invoice sections that you're able to assign those landing zones to. After we fill out the information and provide it to the Power App, it will add the record as we saw. And the next thing is that we should expect to get an email. This email is just letting us know that we created a Power App, a landing zone, and that we should soon be ready to deploy our workloads. So after that, there will be triggered a new flow, which is creating that JSON file, gathering all this information to a JSON object and committing that to our repository. This is a own separate flow, which is going to be run. And after completing this one, it will start to trigger our first pipeline, which is the landing zone pipeline. That's basically where we are creating the subscription, setting up the resource providers, Enter ID groups, and so on. Roger will show us that. And the Power App is also expecting to get a success code back. When it receives that, it will start to run the next pipeline, which is the networking pipeline, where we set up the connectivity part, peer it to our hub, and also send our success code back to the Power App. When that is done, the final email will be sent and let the person that ordered the landing zone know that you can deploy your workloads. And in that time, it's basically a production-ready landing zone that you can use right away. Roger, could you show us the pipelines that we use for the landing zones?
Will do. So as we just said, what happens first is that our landing zone provisioning pipeline runs, LZ provisioning as we've called it. And the way we've organized our code is that each of our pipelines has its own dedicated repository. And in that repository, we have a YAML file, which typically is the pipeline itself. Then we have a bunch of folders that we'll look at in a little bit. And each of those folders has a PowerShell script that's used as a deployment task, and a main bicep file that we use to kind of kick off our bicep deployment. So when this pipeline runs, what it does is that it picks up the JSON file that was just created by the Power App. It then combines this with our tenant settings file that we have. Again, we're doing this for multiple tenants, so that's why we've introduced a tenant settings file, because there are some settings that are specific and unique to a given tenant. So we combine those. Next, our pipeline then uses reusable PowerShell that we have in our common repository, and it then also picks up our bicep or reusable templates repository and uses that to deploy everything out. As part of the deployment, the subscription is placed in the correct management group according to what was selected when you ordered the when you filled out the Power App. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then, as Erhan mentioned, when everything's hopefully run okay, it reports back to the Power App, and then the Power App starts the next pipeline, the networking pipeline. And in theory, we could have run all of this in one pipeline. When we started to make all this almost 2 years ago now, then we found out that because we had a large amount of tasks in our provisioning pipeline, actually provisioning a landing zone would take an awful long time. And we manage most of the network components as part of the networking pipeline. So that meant that if we were going to make a network change, we'd had to run a complete deployment of everything. So for us, it was just easier to split things into 2 different pipelines. So we had the provisioning part, and then we had the networking part as a separate thing. So this pipeline works in more or less the same way. It uses the landing zone JSON that was just generated, along with the tenant settings. And then we also had to introduce my favorite, the YOLO IPAM. So we don't have an IP address management system. So we kind of decided to halfway make our own. So YPAM or YOLO IPAM. Do not recommend doing this at home, but we didn't have much of a choice. We have a large amount of IP addresses that we need to keep control of. So the networking pipeline, again, uses these configuration files together with the reusable PowerShell modules and the bicep templates or modules. And then in the same way, deploys this to the landing zone. So when the landing zone is done, it's not just only what comes out of the pipeline, but it's a combination of what we do in the pipelines and policies. So if you look at it as a whole, what we do, again, map to the design areas we talked about earlier. We do settings and configurations for security. We make sure that there are Defender for Cloud settings put in place. The value that you entered into the Power App gets added as a budget. As Erhan said, we do create some access control groups that we assign using privileged identity management. As we're doing this across multiple tenants, we needed to have a simplified view of how to manage all these landing zones. So all of our landing zones get added to Lighthouse. So we, from our management tenant, can now see all the landing zones across all our tenants. And right now we have 8 tenants, soon 9 tenants in production, with multiple landing zones in each tenant. So instead of switching directory in the Azure portal, we now can see all the networks, all the resources, everything across all tenants from just one view. On the logging and monitoring side, our main focus for the monitoring isn't the workloads themselves, because that's the responsibility of whoever runs the landing zone. What we're interested in is if someone tries to do something to the landing zone that they're not supposed to. Like if someone tries to unpeer the network from the virtual van, or if someone tries to manipulate some settings that we don't want to, that we control, that's something that we would like to have an alert about. We do use policy to set diagnostic settings. So whenever someone makes something in a landing zone, it will automatically get a diagnostic setting that forwards these logs to our central workspace. Currently, we're not doing too much on the alert front, but that will change very, very shortly. We did have a concept for deploying alerts, and then Microsoft came up and said, hey, why don't you use policies to deploy alerts? And we said, yeah, sounds like a good idea, but that meant we kind of had to take a step back and then redesign our approach for how we do deployment of alerts. On the networking side, again, you saw on the Power App, you fill out the size of the network you want. We make sure that's peered to our virtual van. It gets the necessary DNS settings to be able to use the central DNS service we have. Again, with the policies, we roll out a whole bunch of private DNS policies so that each time someone makes a PaaS service, so a storage account, a key vault, a SQL, whatever you want, and you use a private endpoint for this, the DNS record is automatically added into our central private DNS zones, which means that they will be resolvable from on-prem and from other services or other networks in Azure. If we take a look at the policies, again, I don't know how many of you have seen or studied the cloud adoption framework, but our management group structure and then also the policy structure follows that concept quite closely. So we have a top-level root management group. We call it Eunomia, again, back to our tenant vending machine concept. Where you see we start adding the policies for diagnostic settings, Defender for Cloud, DNS, and so on. Next, we drill down and we have on the one side platform, which is where our platform landing zones go. And on the other side, we have sandbox, which is where our sandbox goes. And we want to make a sandbox slightly more liberal, so it's not you can play around more without hitting more of these policies. But at the same time, it's quite important that you also have some restrictions on what you can connect this sandbox to. So as an example, you are not allowed in a sandbox to create a VPN gateway. You cannot peer a VNet in a sandbox to something else. Right. In the middle, we have landing zones, which is the top level for our landing zone management group structure. Here we have private and public, and this is just categories of landing zones that we have. So as an example, in a public landing zone, you're allowed to create a PaaS service that is exposed to internet. But in a private landing zone, if you try to create a key vault, you will fail a policy if you don't create that as publicly accessed denied. So that means that you have to create a private endpoint in a network, which again then gets auto-registered with the DNS. On the far side, we've called it workload N here. It's just we have one, at least for the time being, we have one specific category of workload that has a custom setup of policies. And we also have this type of landing zones gets deployed into all of our tenants. So again, with our deployment structure here, we roll this out across all our management groups in all our tenants. If you're not familiar with policies, it's hierarchical and you inherit everything from above. So that means that the private landing zone that we just ordered, it inherits the policies from the private management group, landing zone level management group, and Eunomia top level management group. Right. In all honesty, this demo did actually fail when we did this at NIC. We hope it works better now. I don't know if it actually is, but we'll see. So let's take a look. And if I do a refresh. Right. So the LC provisioning. Can someone at the back say if it's big enough, or will I zoom in a bit more? Zoom in a bit more. See if I can manage to, no. Any better? Okay. So we'll look at a couple of things here, and then we'll jump into how this is done code-wise. What we'd like to emphasize here is if you see over here, we have a naming and numbering scheme. This will be easier to see once we jump in and look at the code. But we number all our deployment tasks in a very, very specific way. We'll look at that afterwards, but just keep a mental note of that. So what happens when we run? We now have a customized banner here just for today. But what happens is that we print out a nice art thing at the top, just for fun. And then we have some startup tasks that gathers all the information that was put into the Power App and came in through the JSON file. We build the deployment parameters for the bicep deployment, and we run the deployment. And this is the same in just about all our deployment steps. So this is the deployment step that makes the Entra ID groups that are used for privileged identity management. If we jump down to the 0.5, you'll see we have a slightly different header. That's Erhan's favorite. It's Buff Bunny. Again, it's a stupid thing, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. It works in the same way, gathers some information, and then does the deployment. And this subconfig task is a slightly larger task, so it does it is most of the heavy lifting of the configuration of the landing zone itself. Right, so if we have a look at the code, let me zoom in a bit. Someone let me know when it works big enough. Yep. So as I said, each pipeline that we have has its own repository, and we have more than 15, less than 25 pipelines that builds our entire platform, along with the subscription vending. So we try and have a philosophy of standardizing how all our repositories and code is organized, so that if I make a pipeline in an own repository, it'll be the same flow as this one, which means that if Erhan wants to debug it, he'll be very familiar with how the whole thing is configured. It also makes it much easier to document and make a step-by-step on how to set up a new pipeline in our environment. So we start off with a folder called .pipeline, which is where the YAML file for this pipeline lives. And what it does is that it takes some input parameters. The important thing here is the target subscription. So what this does is that it takes either one or a list of subscriptions that we want to build or run the pipeline for. The Power App triggers this pipeline by just sending the one subscription, which means that when the pipeline runs, it'll only run against the subscription that's not been provisioned yet at this point. We can run this every night and then run it against all our landing zones, and we don't have to make any code changes. So the default will be run all, but you can trigger the pipeline and run it with one. And that means that we can run the deployment much more effectively when we're doing the provisioning part, and we can run it, it can take a lot longer time when we run this nightly. If we go down, again, if you remember back to the illustration we had, when our pipeline runs, it clones down the other repositories that it needs, that has the bicep templates or modules and the reusable PowerShell. And next we start jumping into our deployment tasks. The naming scheme that we use here, as you can see here, we have 0.1 provisioning, EID groups, PIM role configuration, and so on. And this structure makes it super easy to debug. So if, say, 0.3 PIM role config failed and you saw that in the portal, it's very easy to find out where that piece of code lives in the repository, and you can start debugging it right off. It also helps when we're looking at setting up the task itself. Again, we have, let's say for discussion's sake, 20 pipelines. Each of those pipelines has 5-6 tasks. That's a whole bunch of deployment tasks that you need to come up with creative names for. This just makes it much easier to copy something that was, change the folder name, and off you go. If we look at what's inside one of these folders, as we mentioned earlier, we have a PowerShell script, Eunomia Azure task or an easy task that does the deployment. And then we have the main bicep, which is that kicks off the bicep deployment. If we jump into the PowerShell script, let me just compress this. It starts off with some parameters, not the most exciting thing, but we wrap everything inside of a try catch. And we don't really do very much creative stuff with the try catch. We just basically run everything inside a try catch. We don't do any creative rollback or anything like that. But this, let's say 90% of the time, works super well right out of the box. If something fails, then that's caught by the catch, and we can dump this back out to the pipeline, and it will halt the pipeline. We can do an awful lot more creative things, but it's just team leader here. I don't think it's worth the there's no return of investment for spending lots of time on this. It works super well most of the time. So we start off by importing our common PowerShell modules. We do have a version of this where we are preloading these PowerShell modules as part of the pipeline setup. So inside the job, before each script starts, the PowerShell modules are already preloaded, which means we can skip this as part of our scripts, but for now it's in here. Then we have a test of an imported PowerShell module. Again, here's the art thing. If we have a look at that one, if I can find it. So here you can see we had the one we used for Nick. Again, this is a super stupid function, but it's quite fun to talk about because it shows how easy it is for us now to make a change, right? So if we change the contents of intro, that means that all the deployment tasks that we have will now start using this as a header. And this works the same way for everything else as well. So if you have the same task that you're doing in multiple deployment steps or multiple scripts, then if you have this in a common PowerShell module in the same way as a bicep template, you can make the update one place and it'll automatically be replicated out to everything else that you're doing. Let's see. So if we jump back to the deployment task, we then start gathering the information that we need. You see we are loading some settings, tenant settings. Then we start picking out the information that we need. Again, relating to what was entered into the Power App, the billing profile, the invoice section, the workload name, and the name of the subscription. All this comes as part of combining what came in through the Power App and what's in the tenant settings. If we jump down to the deployment parameters, what we do, we try to be as consistent as possible in our naming. Again, this just makes things an awful lot easier when I'm debugging something that Erhan did or vice versa. So we generate a unique deployment name with multiple deployments. It's super easy to run into the scenario where you redeploy something and you end up having the same name. This thing just ensures that we always get a unique name for our deployment. We send the deployment details that were just generated a little bit further up. And again, we use one of our common PowerShell modules. And this PowerShell module, let's see. It's actually down here. Sorry. Right. What we're doing here is that instead of being up to whoever makes the deployment script to find out, okay, this is a bicep deployment, is it a subscription level deployment, is it a management group level deployment, is it a resource group level deployment, we just have one common Eunomia bicep deployment function. And then that deployment function will figure out, is this tenant level or what scope is the deployment at? And then just run, this is the standard deployment command in PowerShell to deploy a bicep template. And again, the advantage of using a common module or a function is that when we're using this on, say, 100 tasks, and we find out there's a bug or we want to make some kind of change, we make the change inside what we're looking at now, and then this is then picked up by all the 100 deployment tasks without us making any changes. All right. If we take a look at the bicep, our goal with both the PowerShell and the bicep isn't necessarily to make the most epic bicep template that you've ever seen. But the goal is to try and make something that is simple and easy to read and that we can reproduce multiple times. Again, back to the whole reusability part and debugging part, that if we make our own things, it's easier for us to go and debug each other's code if everything looks more or less the same. So what we're doing here is that this main bicep now calls to one of our common bicep templates or modules, if you will. And this now runs one time for each of the subscriptions that's entered into the target subscription. as a parameter. And this means that when our Power App triggers this pipeline, this will run once. But when we run this every night, we will run all the landing zones. And again, we make no code changes to be able to do this. It's the same code. It's just the parameters that decide what happens with the deployment. All right, we check the deployment and see how we're doing. So as you can see, at least without having seen the other one, the other pipeline, we're now further along than we were at Nick. So that's always a good thing. But if we now hit that one, right, and one more.
Yes.
I keep messing this up.
One more time.
Right. And if we now look at this one, then we can see that our networking pipeline also now has run successfully. And this pipeline works in more or less the same way. It has our nice decorator at the top. It gathers some information, and all this extra text is related to our EPAM. It's just figuring out what the next available range is for our VNet, allocating that, committing it back to the repository. Again, please don't do that. It's not worth the pain. Then we start creating all the network resources that we'll look at in just a little bit. I don't know how we're doing time-wise now. If we will just jump over to, yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Let's take a look at the landing zone. All right. As we saw from the pipelines, we spent 14 or 15 minutes on the landing zone provisioning and 4 minutes on the networking part. So in total, 20 minutes to provision a landing zone, which is pretty great because of the amount of work that is necessary for a landing zone to be completely production ready. And as I mentioned, we should expect to get those emails, but I can see that I haven't opened my Outlook, so that makes sense. But in the meantime, let me log out real quick just to refresh the token. And hopefully we got those email addresses. All right, let's see. As we can see here, we have 2 email addresses, emails that we just received. The first one is just letting us know that we just ordered a landing zone and showing the information that we provided. And the second one is just telling us that it's ready for use. And if you need any help, take a look at the documentation that we have. So let's jump back to the portal. And as I mentioned, we're creating 3 different Enter ID groups that will be used for access control. And we have one for reader, one for contributor, and one for owner. If you were to do some changes or modifications, you have to elevate your access to be able to do that. By default, you'll get reader access if you're part of any of those groups. So you'll have access to see the landing zone, but not to do any changes. So under privilege identity management, my roles, Azure resources, we should be able to see that I can now elevate my access for my subscription owner for the landing zone that we just created. That shouldn't be necessary to do now. If we take a look at the landing zone that we just provisioned, and let's see what we created. The first resource group here that we have is for the virtual network, and the VNet we should expect to get 64 IP addresses if everything went correctly, as it did. And we can also see that, is it big enough for you guys back there? Yeah. We can also see that the virtual network is peered to our virtual hub. This means that we are able to access on premises. The only thing we need is to have some network rules that needs to be set up for the landing zone to be accessing the on-premises, but the connection is there and they can order the openings. And we also have some application security groups and NSG network security group for those rules. The second resource group is just a resource group for our network watchers. We use that for monitoring purposes on the network to see the flows and logs. And that's pretty much it on what we are creating for the landing zone. Those landing zones we are responsible for, and when we start to deploy or run our pipeline daily, and if someone tries to do some changes in those resource groups, that will be switched back to what the default set is. But as for now, we don't have that, but hopefully soon it will be daily run. And let's see what's next. We also created a budget for the landing zone. The budget should show us the threshold levels. So if you exceed them, you'll just get an alert. No hard cap on that, just alerting the owners. And let's take a look at the policies that we have. We should be able to see the policies that we have to follow. So those are all the policies that we need to follow for the landing zone. And that is all from the policies that are attached on the landing zone level to the private management group, landing zones, and Eunomia. And this is basically from the private and down to the landing zone are specific for the management group hierarchy. If you're in public, you'll have some different policies you have to follow, but those are our base policies for each of the landing zones. And that was pretty much it on the landing zones. So let's try to wrap this up. And so what is next for the vending machine? And as we know that the vending machine, the concept of it isn't something that we can say we're finished with. There's always new changes that needs to be done. We want to take a look at the new policy deployment framework, EPAC, Enterprise Policy as Code, which is something that we want to get some inspiration on the methods and the techniques that they use to deploy their policies. And as well as comparing our code with the Microsoft repositories for Azure Landing Zone. Microsoft has its own vending machine repository that we want to take a more look at and see if we can update ours according to the new standards. And that will also be for the Bicep new features that will help us to eliminate some code and make us have less of work to maintain a bigger Bicep template. And same goes for API versions. Roger recently saw that if you update the API version on creating a subscription, you can add a parameter that tells you which management group hierarchy you want to place that subscription to. As if for now, we are doing that as an own task, own step. And if we just update our API version, we can eliminate that amount of code. And that same goes for code maintenance, new ways to make better code that we have to keep updating. And also for the common services, because as for now, we don't have so many common services in our Power App that we saw. We want to also give some options for developers. They can choose if they want to have a DevOps repository, if they want to have a common key vault, recovery service vault that they want, they can just check that up and we can deploy it predefined from our deployment framework. No more EPAM. It has worked really well, to be honest, but the amount of IP addresses that we work with and the amount of banks, we have to have something more standardized and something that is more robust. So we want to take a look at Azure Zone IPAM. So still in preview, told us, so maybe you can sign us up. Additional self-service options are also something we were taking a look at. As I mentioned with the network rules, whenever if you want to have any firewall openings or any network security group rule added, you have to go through us. So that will be a ticket system as for now, but we want to create some more self-service option for that. That was the last one. And we have some links, a blog post that we created. It's a 3-part series on how we made the landing zone vending machine, and also some links for the ALZ Bicep and Bicep landing zone vending, GitHub repo, Carmel, APAC, Cloud Option Framework, and so on. And that is pretty much it for what we had today. I hope you guys found this interesting and can bring some inspiration back to your places and try to make something on your own, or if you have done, maybe you can show us for the next Azure user group. And I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but if the timing is bad, we can take some questions afterwards. We're here for that as well. So thank you guys for listening. 07. Var det pause nå?
We can do questions now, or yeah, we can do questions now if there are any questions. If not, then that's also fine. No questions?
Yeah.
Okay, come find us afterwards if you think of
Maybe
some.
the teams, I haven't checked that. Var det noen I Teams som skrev noe? Yeah, you can take the microphone.
Okay.
Don't have HDMI on that, I guess.
I believe.
Do you have?
I have a
USB-C.
connector.
You do?
Oh, I have yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, I think that would be better.
One of these or?
Yes. This one there.
You need it.
Good talk, guys. Thank you so much. Can I get on the internet? That's the question.
Beyond the guest. You already have a guest?
Okay, hello. So mine's not as detailed as the other guys' was, but let's go through it. So cost is a big thing in Azure, if you guys haven't figured that out yet, right? Everything costs money. Crazy. And before you know it, you're buying a Ferrari in the cloud. So I'm here, even as a Microsoft representative. I'm trying to get in here and help you guys understand that you can run. What's a bad car company, or not a bad car company? What's a car company that is not as great as a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, but below that? Tesla. Okay. I was thinking like Volkswagen or what's the Russian car that everyone drives in Russia? Lotto, right? It just works. So that's where I want to bring you down to, okay? There's a lot of ways to save money in Azure. And the number one way is to go to Azure Cost Management. Has everyone been to this before, seen this? Perfect. Yes. Well, the great thing now is that we have Azure Copilot. I don't have a demo of that today, unfortunately. Shucks. But Azure Copilot, it's a new little tab up on the top next to that by the Cloud Shell, and it allows you to ask questions about your billing for your subscriptions or the subscriptions that you own. So that can enhance your ability. But like you found out with Copilot, it all depends on your prompt engineering. And as you will figure out, prompt engineering will be the key technology you should be learning going forward. Will revolutionize how you use Copilots or ChatGPT alike. All right. So like I talked about, I work with a lot of customers around Norway and even the world, and they come to me all the time and they say, Zach, we need to reduce our cloud spending. I said, okay, that's easy, guys. All you have to do is turn off all your VMs. Done. Just saved you 100%. They said, Zach, come on, be realistic. We need to run this stuff. I said, okay, what do you want to sacrifice? Performance? No, we want to run a Ferrari, okay? But you also want to maintain a Ferrari, right? No, we want to maintain a Volkswagen. Okay. So if you guys don't know this, high-end sports cars usually have low-end parts in it. We'll have like a Maserati will have a Volkswagen chip in it, right? But if you buy it from Maserati, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. But if you buy it from Volkswagen, it costs you 25 euros. Okay, same thing goes here. So you can deploy in the cloud, and my stocks, and if you guys have any stocks in some tech funds or anything, great, right? Keep on spending money in Azure like it's going out of style. But what we want to talk about is how can we reduce that bill? How can we make it more manageable? So here we have two things that make Azure saving. So we have software, which is our Azure Hybrid Benefits, our software assurance packages for all Windows license and things like that, Windows and SQL license. But also Azure Hybrid Benefits also works with Red Hat, OpenShift. It works with SUSE Linux, things like that too. So if you're using that, you can get a discount at scale. And then it's infrastructure. So we have reserved instances, if you're using those. Then we have spot virtual machines. If you're not using those, you should be using those. That's like buying a Ferrari for the price of a Volkswagen. And then we have Azure Savings Plans, which is pretty new, a very unique concept. But as you will see, and I'll talk about it later, but reserved instances, you can't sell them back anymore. as you used to. So that's a big downside. Also, I'll go through it again later in the slide here, but with the reserved instances, they're not as flexible as savings plans. Savings plans work across the globe. Reserved instance only works across that Azure region. And as of today, you can't make you can't go from West Europe to Norway East, right? You have to buy a whole new license, which is not ideal. So I'm a fan of savings plans. It doesn't save you as much money as a reserved instance, but it allows you a lot more flexibility. So with these in mind, you can save almost 50% on your workload. That's pretty crazy to me. Eye-opening when you see it. Okay, but there's even better things you can save money on. Okay, have you guys ever heard of this right sizing? Right sizing is actually very complex. It's super hard to go into a VM that's running a workload just fine and understand from a business perspective, how can I optimize my workload to use less CPU, less RAM, less network, right? It sounds simple, but when you ask people how to do this, they say, we don't know. I can tell you from experience, on average, I see VMs running only at 4% CPU on average. That means that you are wasting 95% of that CPU workload. But why? But the reason why is if you go into Azure Monitor and you look at the metrics and you put it up, it will be average. And don't forget, your workloads probably aren't working 24/7. So on average, they're probably idle. So take that into consideration. You can't just go down to, yes, they're average 4%, but during the work hours or during your threshold, they could go way up. So you want to try to find the middle place. And how can I make a D8 SKU? Can I make it go down to a D4? Will it work? Maybe I'll have some performance issues, but does that outweigh the price? This is something that you have to decide, right? So right sizing on that perspective. Okay, my favorite topic is this topic here. Okay, Ultra Disk are extremely expensive. Okay, they're not even in Norway East at least. Premium SSDs, oh, these things cause me headaches, right? You guys deploy a P20 and you're like, oh yeah, P20, that'll work. And you're like, oh, I need 16 terabytes of storage. Okay, I'll go up to a P80. Whoo! You know how much that is? P80 is like 15,000 a month. US dollars. 150,000 kroner, guy, right? Yeah. Times 10, yeah. 150,000 kroner. That's crazy. Shut the front door. Okay? So I'm going to show you guys something here, okay? You guys all seen the Azure price calculator, right? Let me see if I can make it pop up. This one, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to show you something. Okay. We'll make this work somehow. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, now how do I manipulate it from that screen? Okay. Whew. We're going to figure it out, guys. All right. So I go to storage counts. Really quick here. Hey, we don't need any help. Get out of here. Thank you. Really quick here. I want to show you guys this. Now, I fought behind the scenes for 6 months to get premium SSV2s into Norway East. Okay? 6 months. And I finally got it into Norway, and it only came to one availability zone. And I told them, come on, guys. Everyone wants it in all 3 AZs. When is that going to happen? Give me the hardware. I need it tomorrow. Okay? So let me show you this. Okay. First, we got to go over here, manage disk. We're just for simplicity here. Sweden Central is our cheapest European region, so I'm going to pick that. I'm going to pick premium SSD, like I talked about. Like I said to you, P70. Okay. This is in US dollars. You guys want me to put it in Norwegian? Is the US dollar okay? Fine, perfect. 19,000 NOK for this guy to run for 1 month. Woohoo! Crazy. Okay. What if I could tell you I can turn that price in half? Would you be like, come on, come on, guys. No, you can't do that. Can you do that? Okay. So what I'm going to do, bring this down to SSD2s. Now I want to have 16 terabytes. 1, 2, 3, 16 terabytes. Okay. So now I can have, so remember the reason the use case I gave you here is that the customer doesn't want to have 16 terabytes. The only reason they needed 16 terabytes is because of the IOPS that they needed. So I don't actually need 16 terabytes. What I actually need is 3 terabytes. Okay. And I need those 3 terabytes to be at 55,000 throughputs. Because why not? Like I said, we're running Ferrari, right? And we're going to need max. So this is IOPS, 55,000 IOPS. When you're going to put it at 1,200 throughput. Okay. What's the price on this? $549. Come on, 5,000 compared to 20,000. What you gonna do? Right? No brainer. What are you guys gonna do tomorrow? Yes, you're gonna deploy SSD V2s. Enough said. Okay, that was that. Just saved you 50% of your budget. But no, all reality, okay? You can scale IOPS and throughput by a simple PowerShell command as you go with SSV2s. As we call them PV2s internally. So PV2s, you can change the IOPS as you want. Up to 80,000 IOPS and up to 1,200 megabytes. Okay, but at the standard price, 3,000 is free, 125 megabytes is free. Okay, you can scale up to 64 terabytes or go down as low as 1 gigabyte. What you should also know about SSV2s, they're pretty new. There's a lot of great things coming out. What I shouldn't be telling you in this recorded session, but I will, is SSV2s are coming to operating systems. They're not out for operating systems yet, but they are coming for operating systems. Where we see the best performance is when customers are running VMs that need are running Oracle or SQL clusters or something like that. Because like I said, you can improvise that IOPS as you want without turning off the VM. Now, the gigabytes, that's coming. You're going to be able to do that on the fly. But as of today, you can't do that on the fly. You have to unmount the disk and put it back in. But rest assured, it is coming, or you can just boom. So that right there, 50%. All right. So talking about cost optimization here, I really want to talk about this. And that is, we just heard about the cloud adoption framework. A lot of great things out there. Best practices change all the time. You guys are a company, if you guys are part of a company or individually, make sure that you understand that the best practice is what goes for you or your industry that you work in. Say we have some well-architected frameworks, cost optimization, reliability, all this stuff, security, operations. We already talked a little bit about RIs, hybrid benefits, and we'll go into some spots. You've all been to Azure Advisor. You've been there? You checked it out? You don't know what it is? Check it out. It gives you Microsoft recommendations on how you could improve your systems, either it comes from security side or cost sides or other operations. We talked about management, and we'll go into the policies and everything else here soon. Okay, where do you want saw that slide? Okay, what you guys had in your landing zone, your vending machine, was budgets. You want to elaborate on why you have budgets? And every subscription should have it. Because without it, you can buy a Ferrari. I have any of my coworkers on the call anymore? Yeah. I had a coworker. I see some. Yeah, I see them up there. But I had a coworker who spent, okay, you guys sitting down? Everyone sit, okay. $4 million in 1 month. I said, what? How was that possible? I just spun up everything, didn't close anything down. Okay. That's what gets you. The next month, by the way, his cost report went to 0. I don't know if he's still with the company or not, but yes, budgets. They're key. Really have them in your system. Okay. Can I go next? Come on. All right. We talked about management groups. You started the hierarchy. What you did not see here is at each level, each different management group hierarchy, you can put tagging conventions in there. You can put cost saving benefits in there, right? So on your sandbox accounts that you guys were sharing, if you're just learning on the sandbox account, there's no reason for you to be deploying an M series. An M series costs like $2,000 an hour. Okay, you want to build a Ferrari? Yeah, that's how you just start deploying M series everywhere. Or HB series, that's right. So we can restrict that by putting in the correct policies and making sure that you are not deploying higher standards. And this is how you allow innovation and everything like that to scale. You need people to explore, and you also need it for yourself, right? So everyone can create management groups. You don't need to have an EA or MCA agreement with Microsoft. You can do this on your own tenants and create your own management group and make sure that you are not deploying Ferrari VMs. We talked about tagging. You guys have tags that you automatically deploy. For example, you have owner, and you have a cost tag, and you also have what's the company code? Yeah, created by. And you need all this stuff because when you look at it in another view, or if you use Power BI to look at your spending reports, as your FinOps teams should be doing. Well, FinOps is another finance and operations merged together. Play on word of DevOps. Yeah, okay. But you really need to have correct tagging in place. There is companies all around the world who don't have tagging. And they always come to me and they say, we have no idea what we're spending our money on. We're just paying an invoice. Okay, let's get back. Let's put it in the management group, make everything tag, bada bing, bada boom. Tagging is essential. You can't tag everything, but tagging is essential. So I talked about it already. Savings plans, really powerful. You really need, I don't know actually, I should double check on this, is do you have to be, no, I think everyone can order a savings plan. You don't have to be an EA or MCA. Everyone can order a savings plan. So buy savings plans if you can. I think that'll be good. I'm not going to go too much into this. I just mainly wanted to tell you about savings plan. Come on, computer. Holy buckets. So savings plans allow multiple services combined together. So you go in a savings plan. I'm going to show you a screen later here that you want to pay $35 an hour. If you go over that $35 an hour, you go back and you pay as you go. If you go underneath $35 an hour, then you're losing money. So you want to try to find that sweet spot and save some money. So you can use Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Functions, Azure Container Instances, Azure App Services, Azure Spring Apps, dedicated hosts, and I hope there's more coming soon. I would love to see SQL up there because as of right now, you can only buy SQL through RIs. Yep. Yes, you can lock your price for a year or 3 years. Yep. Well, isn't FX rates suck? Yes, you should look into that, definitely. Here's the savings plans and how you order it. So like I said, 1 year, 3 year. A lot of people don't want to commit for 3 years. But understand that if you get a 1 year and you get it for $1, you're going to pay for that whole dollar. Okay. You can look into this. I wish Azure had a better way to report on savings plans. I don't have the link in front of me. I can try to find it later. But there is a guy out there who has created his own Power BI reports that really make it a better visualization and how much you can save and how it will impact your system. He has a really good calculator. I can see if I can find it. But you can see here, this person is using $5, putting in monthly, and then you can do it for a specific resource or a management group or only on the subscription. It depends on how your billing structure is in your company. For me, just share it across. And what we'll do is if you buy a 3-year for $50, let's say $50 an hour, and then you use all of that, you're consuming it all, you can actually go into a 1 year and buy $5 and they'll stack onto each other. And I'll always use the 3-year before the $5 one. So then you're getting the max savings out of them. And then you can stack them. That's how you stack them. And you can also stack RIs on top of them as well. But I'm not going to go too much into all these details because I just want to get to the main reason why I came and talked today in a minute here. But this is just the difference between Azure Savings Plan and reserved instance. So you can see with the reserved instance, you can save a little bit more than you can with savings plans. Yeah, but they still have 1 or 3 years. There's no cancellations, and this is an outdated because now there's no cancellations. If you buy a reserved instance after January 1st, you're able to do one change, SKU change, if my memory serves me right, before July 30th, no, June 30th. And then once July 1st comes around, there's no more of that. So some things are changing. Like I talked about already, you can stack your reserved instances. So if you already have one for 3 years and you want to explore what Azure Savings Plan is, you can buy that as well. Saving some money. I'm not going to go through that one. Holy buckets. Okay, now the fun stuff. Monitoring. Do you guys know what Kusto is? I want to see hands up. Hands up, some hands. Kusto is what makes the dream team work. Okay? You guys seeing this? And if you want to learn Kusto, why not do it with gamification? So you get a nice little badge you can share on LinkedIn. If you connect with me, I'll like it, right? But detective.kusto.io, there's 3, I think we're on our 2nd season now. There was a winter hack as well. But really, Kusto is the fundamentals of monitoring in the back end. So behind that, we have made it public now. We have a well-architected cost optimization workbook that everyone can access. It's inside of the advisor, and it's called cost optimization workbook, and it looks kind of like this, right? And behind the scenes of this is, can you guys guess it? Nah, starts with a K. Gusto, woohoo! Loving it. So there's a lot of powerful things you can do there. All right. So like I said, what I really like about it is that you can go in there into these workbooks and you can manipulate them how you want to. So you can go into the code, and like I said, it's called Cost Optimization Preview is the one that's out there now. And you can go in there, you can click on the little edit guy up here, and then you can edit to your organization needs, or maybe you want to see how the Kusto backend is working. You want to play around with it and do more advanced queries, right? That's what you can do. These workbooks will be updated by Microsoft, at least this is what they're telling us, is that the engineers behind it will constantly update them and hear back from feedback and make them better and better over the time. But just so you can look at that. Now I really wanted to go into the topic of FinOps really quick. And if your organization doesn't have a FinOps team, then maybe you guys can start one. Okay? Just knock on the door to your platform leaders or your product leads and say, do we have a FinOps team? I want to be part of it, you know? I want to save money in Azure, right? And I don't know about you guys, but managers love to save money. So there you go. So FinOps is an operation of two and a model that brings the technology and financial leadership teams on the same language. So you really need to connect, and I'm going to show you this next screen here. You really need to connect your engineering team, your finance team, and your business team to all be on the same thing. Like I told you guys at the beginning of this talk here, I have people come up to me all the time. I want to save money, Zach. Tell me. You save 100% right away. Turn it all off. Oh, business. If you do that, we'll lose our whole business. We can't do that. Okay, so what do you want to sacrifice? Performance? Reliability? No, we don't want to do any of that either. Okay? So there's other methods we have to look into. We have to find other ways. We have to work as a team to help business understand that, yes, we can save you money tomorrow by turning it all off. No one wants that. We can reduce reliability. But then when there's the downtime, you're going to pay for that, right? We can reduce the performance, but you might get more tickets in your system by your customers, right? What's the lowest fruit and what do you want to play fire, right? But there is a way to find a nice line between that. And that's all three of these people need to be involved. So that's how we get together. It's easier said than done, but we hope to have, actually, we're going to host a FinOps day, and we really want everyone to come to the Microsoft office and learn more about FinOps. Another thing about FinOps is if you guys ever been to, we have the FinOps toolkit we just launched. You can go to this URL down here at the bottom, and it will have, it will have all the stuff that you need to learn about how can I get FinOps in my organization. So what's really cool about this is it has the new standard. So FinOps is not Microsoft. We're just part of it. We joined them last year in May. We're with AWS, we're with GCP, and Focus is the underlying code that we're trying to standardize. So if you're bringing from AWS or GCP, you're coming down, we all want to have the same reporting. This is what we're trying to do, right? We're all in this together. So that's called Focus. Do read up about it. But what is really cool is it has Power BI templates ready to use. So you can go in here and there's a list of Power BI templates that you can click on. You can deploy if you have Power BI. I think that's really cool. All right, so why we're here today. So we saved some money. Now you guys know some cool things. But what about, how many of you want to just play in Azure for free? Right? Okay. So we have a link here, free Azure services. Go Google, you can Google it, Bing it, whatever your favorite Duck Goose or whatever what's it called? Duck. Go. Okay, that one. Go whatever your favorite is. Free Azure services, you will see a whole list. There's 55 Azure services that are free for a lifetime. Can you guys believe that? A lifetime. We're going to go over some of those. Okay. There's also a lot of Azure services that are free for the first 12 months. Now, it's first 12 months when you open that subscription. I'm not going to say anything. You have a vending machine. Just start creating subscriptions every 12 months. Problem solved. Okay? But no, seriously, guys, go out there and save. Is there any bloggers in the room? Yeah? You use WordPress? No? Make your own. Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, some of the free services there, we have now recently announced a WordPress for free. And we also have app services for free on a very limited tier, but for lifetime, right? So that's pretty cool. All right, so what else is out there? Well, Azure SQL Managed Instances for free. General purpose, up to 100 databases. I don't know if you need 100 databases for your home lab, but you know, when they give you that option, why not create? Yeah, I want to deploy and recreate. Do it. 720 vCores hour every month. What if I go over that, Zach? What if I go over? Well, guess what? We have in place that it will turn it off for you and then start back up next month. Auto. I'll show you that in the next slide. And you also have 64 gigabytes of storage, and it only works on these accounts so far. But let me go to Azure Cosmos DB for Mongo. Any of you guys MongoDB experts? Well, now you will be because it's free. Okay? When there's free stuff, go learn, prosper, think about it. Okay? You never used this before. Now you can go and play with it at home. Zero cost, effortless onboarding, 32 gigs. And if you want to, you can upgrade and pay for it. But who wants that? Didn't I already talk about this? No, oh, that was managed instance. Yeah, okay, that's right. Azure SQL database is also free. You get 100,000 vCores a second of serverless database. What I like about this, though, is it's regardless of your Azure subscription type, which I think they should do for more of these free tiers, because not everyone has a CSP or a pay account. So I think that's really cool. And there's a limit of one free database. Guess what, guys? Per subscription. You know, you can have 100 subscriptions out there. You can have 100 databases. Yep. So I love this image right here. Free. You guys like free things? You got free pizza today. Thank you, guys. Sponsored. I talked about this already, but the free hosting plan for WordPress on app services. Yeah. It does depend. I tried to deploy this earlier today because I was like, I want to be a blogger. You guys see all these influencers out there? They're making like millions. I can do that. No. I don't got time for that. But where to go from here, guys? We have a lot of great learning, a lot of great things. I don't know what company does this better than Microsoft, but Microsoft Learn is amazing. And guess what? What is it? Come what? I can't hear you. Come on. Okay, all together. Come on. Oh my goodness. It's free. Oh, okay. I felt like a Steve Ballmer there for a minute, you know? You guys ever seen that, right? Dancing on the stage. I got moves like Mick Jagger. I know. It's okay. But that's it. And I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys go out, use these free services, and expand your learning potential. Yeah, you have questions?
Hello? Yep. How does the Teams thing work with this? Okay. Yeah, so you had questions or? Okay. Yep. So, what again? Yeah, so a couple reasons. Okay, sorry. For the ones listening in, there was a question about our pipeline deployment method and how we are using our templates. So we are cloning the repository that has the templates. An alternate way of accessing these templates would be to publish them in a container registry. And then when the pipeline runs, it just reads from the container registry. So we have thought about using a container registry, but then more as like as Eunomia is a Greek god, so we would call it the sacred road, where we would publish templates and let everyone else consume these templates. The reason why we aren't using a container registry in the first place is that we're coming from like nothing. So the tenant doesn't exist. There is no Azure. So then it makes sense to for us at least, publish the templates in our repository, and then when our pipelines run and builds each tenant and sets up the platform, then it just reads these templates from there. So we could do it so that we, like the initial setup, we would clone it and then we'd use the container registry after that. But again, then we'd have to spend time, then we'd have to, as part of our platform setup, spin the container registry, publish all the templates. So it's like a chicken and egg thing in our case. But yeah, we have thought about it as like a service to all the application infrastructure teams that we share the templates with them. And we have had requests also from different parts or different banks that say, hey, this template you have, can we get it? But yeah, the main reason is that when we started this, we didn't have, there was an Azure, but in the Eunomia sphere, there was nothing. So we just started off with a repository. Yep.
Why didn't you pick Pulumi? Or Terraform, or ARM, or anything but Bicep?
I can Yeah, I can start on that one because we actually started with ARM templates at the very beginning when the question was what, yeah, they heard you. So at the very beginning when we created our platform, we started with ARM templates. And we tried to see if there was something better that we could use or something more updated. The enterprise scale GitHub repository was also using ARM, and we saw that Bicep was something that was fairly new. We saw Terraform, but one of the reasons why we didn't, or there were many reasons for not choosing Terraform, but a couple of them was that we didn't want to keep a track on the state file. And another thing was that we haven't been using Terraform that much in our team, so we didn't have that experience to create a platform with Terraform. And when it comes with ARM templates, we knew that we didn't want to use that in long run. So when we saw Bicep, that it was backed by a huge community, and there was a lot of updates from that community. It was easy switch for us to switch from ARM to Bicep, and yeah.
Okay, so you pick Bicep, but you guys are the platform team. Can the individual product owners use any code that they want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
who likes Pulumi? Anyone knows that?
I mean, when we create the landing zones, we're not creating a Azure DevOps repository for the landing zones that they can deploy their workloads to, or any pipelines for that specific landing zone. We do have some teams or some banks that are working in GitHub, so you can work there. And if you're familiar with if you're more comfortable with using Terraform, you can use Terraform. So it's on your end. And when we deliver the landing zone, we're completely out of the game. We don't talk to the developers and try to force them to choose a language. But when they ask us to if we want to help them out or recommendation, we will always go for Microsoft Native and use Bicep because that's what we are familiar with.
And we do also have different teams that are using a combination of this. So there's an internal team that's building a multi-cloud system. They're using Terraform, and that's Sparebank 1 Utvikling developers that are making this, and they're using Terraform to deploy to all the different tenants. We have another multi-bank system, fairly large CRM thing, where they're using Bicep. We have users that click in the portal, and we have users that are using just PowerShell or PowerShell and Bicep. So we recommend using Bicep, but whatever floats your boat, kind of. It's up to you. So Ansible, whatever you want to go for, it's like just do whatever you want. Well, you could use Go, but by all means. We have our own self-hosted agents. Yeah, sorry, the question. The question is what kind of agents we're using for the pipeline. It's a slightly difficult topic. One thing is the agents themselves, but the other problem is that let's say you order a private landing zone, then the restrictions will mean that you have to make your resources with private endpoints, which will by default mean you can't access them from internet. So you can create the resource, but you won't be able to access it. And that's a problem. So what we have is that we've said that for the different teams that are using our common DevOps organization, we provide self-hosted agents for that. And we're using, we're provisioning those as scale sets. So each team gets their own dedicated scale set in dedicated subnet, which again means that we can control this fine grain on the network level. So we can have multiple teams that don't necessarily, they can't interfere with each other's solutions. And we're using it was used to call not virtual environment, but the published image generation repository. Wasn't it called virtual environment? No. So the code that's used to generate the image that's used for the GitHub hosted agents and the Azure DevOps Microsoft hosted agents is public. Yeah. So what we're doing, we're cloning that one, and we've just integrated it into our deployment setup. So once a week, we recreate all these images and publish them as an image for Linux and Windows, and then we have them as scale sets.
That happens at every deployment. Every time you order a landing zone via the vending machine.
No. So if a development team wants to use Azure DevOps and needs self-hosted agents, they tell us. They say, "Hi, we need a self-hosted agent scale set," and then we add the one line in our CSV, do a deploy, and that spins up and is available for the development team. And the complicated part comes in where we aren't necessarily admins in someone else's DevOps org. So it could be another bank that has its own dedicated DevOps organization or uses GitHub. Then we have a problem, kind of. So what we will be doing as soon as that becomes available, we'll be trying out the GitHub version where you can VNet integrate GitHub hosted agents for the banks that are using GitHub. And we haven't had that many requests so far, but we will have to find a solution of how we attach self-hosted agent scale sets to other DevOps organizations. I think the solution will be we will need to get access and then we will just provision it. But yeah, so we have a few scale sets that get updated each week. But we'll be around here anyway.
Handsome men up here, huh?
Well,
No.
Last one. You mentioned DNS.
Yep.
And do you use the same DNS for all the tenants, or
Yes.
you are okay?
So
They can resolve each other, possibly.
Yep. So that was one of the other big challenges that we had, and we actually have a blog post. Don't we? Yeah, we have a blog post on this about how we solved this problem. Because one of the issues we have a common DNS service on-prem, which is used for all our banks. And that kind of creates a tremendous headache when we have private DNS zones that are tenant local. So we have a whole setup where what we do is that we use Azure policy in the individual tenants. And then we use kind of a reverse lighthouse for that. So if a bank, let's say Nord-Norge, creates a PaaS service, the policy then will write that DNS record into DNS zone that's common in one of our tenants. And then so all the banks, all the tenants write their DNS records to the same DNS zone. And then because everything is interconnected through our virtual WAN, then everything is resolvable by everyone. And then we have a thing between on-prem and Azure where if you're on-prem, you can resolve to all the different banks. So in theory, all the banks should be able to resolve DNS-wise everything that everyone else has, but it's all blocked by firewalls and NSGs and all that stuff. But yeah, so we're kind of proud of that one. We even got referenced by Microsoft there for coming up with a solution to that. Reverse lighthouse. Yeah, because we're doing it the opposite way. So each tenant has a managed identity that gets access to the resource group, I think it is, where we have our private DNS zones. Yeah. So and again, that's controlled by policy. So we do the lifecycle management of the DNS records. So there's a couple of policies, one that creates the DNS record and one that deletes the DNS record if you delete the PaaS service. And this is then done automatically. So no teams need to manually manage their DNS records. They just create the private endpoint. And then I think usually it takes up to 8 minutes from when you've created a private endpoint connected to a key vault or whatever until the DNS record is updated in the central private DNS zone.
The insights.
The crowd and the people online here. What do you guys want to learn more about when it comes to Azure?
Microphone, yeah.
Hello. So people online, people in the audience, what do you guys tell us now? What do you want to learn more about when it comes to Azure or cloud in general? What's your burning questions? They're all experts. That's something that we are working on. We should say kudos to you guys as well, because SB1 was one of the first customers that did a multi-tenant deployment, and Microsoft took that from the playbook, and we wrote our own docs on that off of your guys' learning. So kudos. All right, anyone? You want to learn how to do Kusto? Yes, okay. I'm not seeing any heads nodding here, but I'm assuming they're all nodding. Sign only. Okay, Kusto is king. We were talking about Kusto today, right? Thumbs up. There we go. You guys need to learn Kusto. It's super powerful. We were talking about that earlier today, how powerful it truly is. Understanding what your logs are. That's another thing. I helped a customer a couple years ago. They came up to me and they said, Zach, the cloud is expensive. I said, yeah. Well, we're putting logs into 2 log analytics workspaces. I said, yeah. Why are you doubling your logs? We don't know. Okay. Can you delete one? Yeah, okay. Just saved £1 million. I said, that's good. But do you actually use your logs? We were talking about that earlier today. Do you actually use your logs? You go into your logs proactively and use Kusto to say, hey, what's going on in here? Is everything healthy? Getting some alerts, dashboards, need some feedback, right? It's a favorite saying. You guys ever heard this saying? I have a backup, but I never restored it before. No? Happens all the time. You ever try to restore a backup? Nope. No. Did it work?
Long time ago, but I think it did. Can't quite remember, but I have tried.
Huh.
It wasn't tape that time.
So what's number 1 rule about cloud? You're not using it?
Turn it off.
Turn it off. Because you're paying as you go. The cloud is extremely expensive. If you leave things on, it will cost you money. Yeah. Already kind of.
Yeah. If you have an alert on it, you can act on the alert. So you can possibly trigger an action from the alert. Right? Yeah. You have to write the logic yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
We like money. No, we're trying to save money, right? Because the theory is, more you spend, if you save money, more you will spend. And I think that goes both ways, right? You really need to optimize your systems, and doing that, you inherently will keep on developing in the cloud. And that's what we want to see.
If you can have a joint picture of the Meetup here. And also, if you that listen in on the Teams, if you can turn on your camera, if you want to join in the picture, you can. It's an invitation, but come in, Jan Egil, at least. If you want to join in the group photo, you can turn on the picture and we will stand before for the screen. Egil, woo!
What actually would be great would be to